Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and here we're going to talk about the issue of feminazism, which is the exact opposite and the greatest threat to feminism. And so I was browsing along and I came upon this post here. Let's just give it a look real quick and dig deeper.
And look, just like every other mother, I am exhausted. I am a nanny. I am tech support. I am a cook. I am a teacher, and for so many of us, we've had to supplement, our paid labor for unpaid labor. And again, nobody has asked us. I've been fighting for equality my whole life. My family came here as refugees. My mother has struggled with so many of the issues that so many women in our country, immigrant women in our country, are fighting for right now. And we have to fight for them. We have an opportunity in this pandemic to finish this fight, right? To rebuild this structure. We can't build America back better if we don't build motherhood back better.
So, typically when I see something like this, I think, oh, great, sounds like a good cause. I mean, there were some red
And
flags
look,
there.
just
There's some red flags, but let's dig a little bit deeper and see if it's something that we can support. So we click on the link, we go here. Now, there were red flags on this. I am educated and have a lot of world experience in political science and sociology. As of 3 years ago, I'm also studying psychology at university. I'm not a trained psychologist, but I have picked up a lot of tools. In another few years, if I choose to, I will become a trained psychologist. Might do that. But I have learned a lot. And one of the things I've learned a lot is to pick up on how people talk. The words that they use, especially the pronouns they use, and the method in which they speak, the way that they transition from one topic to the next, tells a lot about their worldview, tells a lot about their pathology and their psychology. I'll get a little bit more into that. But there are already red flags thrown up at me because of the way she talks, as well as the language and vocabulary she's using here. Um, but then we go and look at her page, Marshall Plan for Moms. Now, for those of you who are not American that know what the Marshall Plan is, this is already going to trigger probably something quite negative for you. See, the rest of humanity outside of the United States, which is the majority of humanity, who know what this is because they were somehow involved with America's foreign policy of the Marshall Plan after World War II, they hate the Marshall Plan, and this is one of the American imperialist political agendas that the United States pursued after World War II that did a lot of damage to democracy across, especially Europe. So the Marshall Plan was from the American perspective, of course, it's the exact opposite. From the American perspective, it is basically this. The Marshall Plan was a post-World War II economic rebuilding of European countries primarily. However, it was on the condition that they reject and politically align themselves with American capitalist oligarchy socioeconomic model. They reject unions and communism and working class policies, and they implemented policies that would assist and help America uh, capitalize and take advantage of and profiteer on those economies that America was helping to rebuild. It's the capitalist model. This did incredible damage to a lot of countries that actually went ahead and said, okay, we'll take your aid, UK, France specifically. And it is, the Marshall Plan in these countries is a very negative term. In the United States, it's a very positive term. We helped these countries, we did great help for them, blah, 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 and we defeated communism. That's what Americans think. Um, what they were really doing was harming the most progressive political, socioeconomic, democratically elected models in other countries in order for them to be able to then profiteer off of those economies at a later date. So I think the wording of the choice of Marshall Plan for this agenda is not so good. But let's forget about that. A discussion on Marshall Plan and politics and history is another topic. Um, so let's dive into what this actually is. This is a aid program for mothers. Now, automatically, a normal, sane, civilized adult would look at this and say, Why is it using the female pronoun and there's not even a neutral pronoun on this entire website, and there's definitely not a male pronoun on this entire website? That's a little bit of a red flag, but let's read it and give it a chance. So this is what she is proposing to President Biden. She is proposing three things. Establish a task force to create a Marshall Plan for moms. What this kind of thing is often included in bills that are proposed, especially in the United States. This is how politics in the United States often works. If a politician wants to propose a bill, they're going to put something in there that specifically is tied to the bill. So if the bill passes, it passes. It's an all or nothing kind of a thing. And there will be something in the bill that gives them something out of it, whether there's a new committee or a task force created, putting, of course, them in charge of it, giving them another position of power and or another position where they can draw an extra salary from. This is how corrupt American politicians do their stuff. If they're ever going to do something good, they're going to get something out of it. Unfortunately, that is American oligarchy capitalist politics. This is, of course, illegal in civilized developed countries, for those Americans watching that are not aware of this. But that's why this clause is here, and that's very clear. In order to have to actually create an entire task force for this agenda is absurd, even if the agenda wasn't itself absurd and simple. But this clause right here clearly shows that this woman wants to be in charge of a political task force, draw another $500,000 salary a year from it, and all she would be doing would be sitting on a task force, going to the House reps maybe a few times a year and saying, I have a vagina, so you need to pay me more money. That's effectively what this entire thing is. Number two, implement a short-term monthly payment to moms depending on needs and resources. I would not be in opposition to that whatsoever, especially in the United States where it's needed, if this said parents. And the whole objective of this is basically, I mean, I've read this, I've read up on this and a few other things. My understanding of her entire objective here is that COVID pandemic has ended the careers of many people. Well, she's of course only concerned with the females that it has affected. She doesn't care about the males. But let's just, I mean, even though that is completely morally bankrupt and uncivilized and wrong and also unconstitutional, if we're talking legal, United States here, not that that's how everything happens anyway, but let's just go with that anyway and say, okay, let's forget about the men for this, conjecture and just think about the women whose careers have been ended, and let's try to, solve for them. So she's going here and saying that, 2 million of them have left the workforce at a rate of 4 times that of men in September alone. I've looked up some different numbers on this, and it is somewhere around 1.6 to 1. So 60% more females have left the workforce than males. There are some months that are worse than others. I don't know if September was like a cherry picking of that, where she chose September specifically because I don't know what happened in August before September. Maybe that was one of the federal movements where they shut down retail or food and beverage businesses, and there's predominantly more women working in those kinds of businesses than men, so more of them lost their jobs. Could have been like that. But I definitely do agree, because the facts state very clearly that there are more women that have been financially affected by COVID than men as far as their careers and financial support. So yeah, fully in support of helping them. I do not, however, think that we should be helping women at the expense of not helping men, which is the feminazi ideology and the feminazi kind of perspective. It's a zero-sum game, where I'll get into that a little bit later. But basically, you can see here very clearly that all of this is for mothers. It says it is the female pronoun in this entire page. You cannot even find a neutral pronoun like parent on this entire proposal, on this entire page. She defines mother here, unpaid female caregiver responsible for virtual schooling, cleaning, nursing, nannying, cooking, tech support, likely forced to leave the workforce during COVID-19 pandemic. Why couldn't she have put parent here and just put unpaid parent caregiver that would have been the ideals of feminism if she had put parent and made it inclusive and equal and promoted equality between mothers and fathers. But of course, that's not what she's doing. And that is the real problem. That is why I'm making this video. When I see political issues like this, I typically decide pretty quickly. I research everything, and I decide pretty quickly whether I will support it, stay neutral on it, or oppose it. The reason I'm making this video is because I am opposing this. And it's really sad because there's a lot of things here that I completely agree with. In fact, I overall agree with this entire plan if it would have just changed all of the wording to parents and not moms. And that's really what this video is about. Implement a short-term monthly payment to parents, depending on needs and resources. I would have fully supported that. Excluding fathers from this is not only unconstitutional and illegal in most civilized countries, not the United States, of course, but it is morally wrong. It is not equality. It is not feminism. It is the exact opposite. Also, you should know, if you don't already, that there are already currently more state and federal support for females versus males and for mothers versus fathers. There's a massive difference in state and federal funding, programs, support, paid leave, unemployment benefits, everything is already skewed entirely towards females and mothers versus males and fathers, which should be illegal and under the Constitution is illegal, but it's already like that, and it's been like that for a long time. So this is the kind of bill that actually takes the pronoun and specifically says these rights, privileges, and powers are only for females. That is the kind of feminazism that exists now in this country that is incredibly dangerous, not only to society, but to feminism, to equality. This is the greatest threat. Pass long overdue policies like paid family leave. For those poor, unfortunate Americans watching, you are a citizen of one of the only 2 countries in the entire world that does not, by law, require employers to provide paid family leave. And it's pretty sick. I fully support every movement to create legal obligation of paid family leave. I am even of the crowd that believes that and supports that women in this instance actually do deserve, because of biological and scientific reality and facts, they deserve more paid maternal leave than fathers should get in paid fraternal leave. I believe and would support any movement to provide 25%, 50%, even 100% more paid time off for mothers than paid time off for fathers, being a father myself. Affordable childcare. Well, duh, obviously. The United States is also literally the worst country in the United Nations Developed Countries Index for childcare and healthcare. So we definitely need more of that. And pay equity. Pay equity is a term that came up in the feminist movement, which I fully support. And I've proven that because I currently employ female software engineers. And everyone that works in any of my teams gets equal pay no matter what they are. As far as gender, we don't even have gender as part of their record. We don't look at that. We don't even bring that up as a topic. And I'm fully in support of what original pay equity means, which is that if you have a software engineer who is a male and a software engineer who's a female, and they do the same job, they get the same pay. There is 20 to 30 years of research that I've even participated in that goes very deep into this issue of the pay gap that clearly shows that there is a 40% increase in hours worked based on gender, and it is the males 80% of the time that work 40% more hours than females in the same position. So naturally, if a male software engineer is working 50 hours a week and a female software engineer is working 40 hours a week, they're on the same team, they're otherwise doing the same stuff, I would pay that male more. That's just called equality. That is called pay equity. Now, what she means here in her pay equity, I highly doubt that's what she actually means, because that actually does function overall. It doesn't function everywhere, and we still need to work on that a little bit as a society. But pay equity, in the original context of what it's supposed to be, of the feminism movement and whatnot, 60s and 70s, has pretty much, for the most part, been accomplished. It's been accomplished in Europe, and I'm a multi-citizen, including one European country, where that has already been law for quite a long time, and it's not even an issue. In the United States, it hasn't fully been implemented into law yet. We're behind, of course, as we are with everything, and I hope it does. I hope it does get implemented. I have been doing that myself for the last 20 years in my professional career anyway, even though the law doesn't require me to. I do it because it's a no-duh factor to me. So the base idea of all of this is actually good. But the fact that she's doing this only for moms at the exclusion of fathers is bad. And so doing all of this only for moms, further increasing the gap between the already massive bonuses for females versus males, the already massive bonuses for mothers versus fathers, is going the exact opposite direction of what feminism and equality is all about, and therefore I must oppose this. Sadly. And that's really where feminazis, like this lady, really hurt us, because they sometimes come up with things that could help, but then they use that towards feminazism, authoritarian incentives, rewards, and power for women at the cost of men, rather than doing it for something good. Now, I didn't come to that conclusion fully after just reading this page. I read this page, I was a little concerned, and then I went and I looked who's behind this. That's what I do when I look at anything, because it's people that make things happen. And if the person is a corrupt elitist who is lying through her teeth and doesn't represent anything that she's talking about, then I can pretty much guarantee that the output of her organization and her agenda is going to be the same thing. And now I want to make very clear here that I do not condone attacking people in any way. In this instance, she has put herself as the face and the representative of this idea. And so, to be fair, I do not think, I've done the same thing many times in my life, I do not think it's fair to separate her and her background from the idea and the agenda she's putting forward, to see why the motivation and the method of how she would go forward with this in a decision on whether or not to support it. I think those two things are inseparable. So I go and I look at who this person is. She has a Wikipedia page, she has a LinkedIn, and she has her own website. On her Wikipedia, it shows that she is I think the phrase is fitting, that she's a silver spoon-fed elite American. She went to, Illinois, Chicago, Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Then she went to Harvard and Yale and did her juris in 2002. Then she went and worked for 4 years as an associate here in this law firm. This law firm where she defended securities fraud cases. So she was literally the defense attorney for the criminal Wall Street fraudsters for 4 years. After that, she went and joined the criminal Wall Street fraudsters. Specifically, an actual convicted felon on Wall Street fraud. And of course, she claims that she had no knowledge of any of it, even though she was a lawyer for these guys, then went to work for the same kind of people. Oh, but I don't know anything about it. I don't believe that. After her coworker was convicted of fraud, she then jumped to a private equity group, part of the Carlyle Group, that was part of, and the hedge funds that were responsible for the 2008 market collapse. Oh boy. So she's a defense attorney for Wall Street fraudsters. Then she goes and joins the Wall Street fraudsters, and literally an actual convicted felony fraudster. Then she goes and works for the unfortunately not convicted. None of the Wall Street guys went to jail and were convicted because of what they did in 2008, which just shows what kind of an oligarchy the United States is, obviously. And then she worked for them. Oh boy. So having that kind of a career, 3 steps of moral, criminal, corrupt disaster, oh, well, she thought she'd be a perfect candidate for Congress. And unfortunately, because the United States is a corrupt capitalist oligarchy, she is actually a perfect candidate for Congress, having that kind of background. This is the picture of who our politicians are in the United States. She was unsuccessful at that, so she went back to the hedge funds and the Wall Street fraudsters. After that, she founded this nonprofit organization, Girls Who Code. And at first glance, I'm actually excited. Girls Who Code. I love hiring more women. I've built and run technology companies in Asia where there's actually more women in coding and software engineering than men anyway. So it's actually the opposite over there. But here in the United States, I definitely think that giving the open door and more opportunities to girls to get into technology and science and STEM in general is great. I'm in full support of that, especially as a father to a young daughter. I routinely get her STEM kits every month. I have them shipped to us, and we do STEM projects every month. She's not even in kindergarten yet, and I'm already doing that with her. And it really depends. I want my daughter to grow up to be a feminist, a woman, not an American feminazi, but a woman, and do whatever she wants, and know that she can do whatever she wants, and support her in doing whatever she wants. I think that's just like a no-duh factor, but absolutely not be a feminazi who thinks that because she's a female has the right to get privileges and handicaps and incentives, and she grows up to be an abuser, which most American women are actually. 75% of American women freely admit that they are abusers of their male partners. I mean, that's insane. And yet it's 99.9% of all domestic violence arrests are on men. This is the sick, morally bankrupt society that we live in because of feminazis like this that I must stand in opposition to, not only for my own safety as a man in this country, even though I don't plan on being here too much longer, but for the sake of my daughter and all the other boys and girls in this country growing up, learning and being brainwashed into believing that this is normal and acceptable. It's not. It's not at all. So, continuing with this fine lady here who had a great run-up in her career of being a fraud lawyer and then a fraudster, Wall Street elitist, everything. She creates a nonprofit for girls to do code, and she takes $250,000 salary a year from that nonprofit organization. Oh, really? So her only actual, she heads this nonprofit organization, and the only reason that she heads it is because she has a vagina. That's the only claim to, um, validity that she has in that role. She has no experience with technology, anything on her, CV. Um, but she's running this organization to get girls to code because she's a girl and she makes $250,000 a year for being a girl. And according to her website, she's an accredited angel investor with a lot of investments. So she definitely has money. She books a lot of press. She wrote a book, Brave Not Perfect. And the synopsis of this book, I read the back cover of it, and I actually agree with that. I mean, girls should be taught just like boys should be taught to be, uh, willing and able and encouraged to do whatever they want, to be brave and go out there and do what they want. Be individual. Try things. Don't try to be perfect. Don't be. One of the bad things about raising girls in this country is that there's this princess syndrome, Cinderella syndrome in American culture, where girls are raised to be princesses. I don't raise my daughter that way. Um, and anybody that does raise their daughters that way, you're doing a huge disservice to your daughter and to feminism in general. So that if that's the aspect of this, I totally agree with that. I'm a little skeptical if that's really what this is all about, but I'm going to give this a thumbs up and a pass because I haven't actually read the book. I don't believe in criticizing something that you don't actually know about. So, but then you look at this, where she's taking $250,000 a year in salary for going up there and saying girls should learn how to code. And the problem with this is that, so imagine that you are a fourth grade boy in elementary school in the United States, and you really want to learn how to code. Um, and there's this after-school program, and that's the only program that your school supports because they have to choose one or the other. And they obviously don't have money and funding to do all their own things. So this is the program at your school for coding. Oh, but you're a boy. You're not allowed. You call that equality? You call that feminism? No, that is feminazism. And that's the problem. And that's the problem with people like this and the work that they do. And they're profiteering off of it. Yeah. I want to replay this video and give a little bit of my comments on it as she talks. Because through psychology, I'm also looking at her facial expressions and the words that she uses. And I'm not a licensed psychologist, even though in a year or two I can be if I want to. So I'm just not going. I'm going to refrain from going too deep into it. But I don't want to claim more than I can officially and authoritatively claim. But it is very concerning to me.
And look, just like every other mother, I am exhausted. I am a nanny. I am tech support. I am a cook. I am a teacher.
Now, she says she's a cook, she's a teacher, she's a nanny, she's tech support, and she has one child, and she has $250,000 a year from this nonprofit. Um, she has lots of investments. She probably gets another few million a year easily from that. These people don't, I know a lot of these kinds of people, they don't take care of their kids. They don't raise their kids. They have servants living with them at home, butlers, whatever you call them, taking care of their kids. And you can see the fakeness in her face. Well, I can. What she is saying right here is a script. She has nothing to do with working class Americans. She has never experienced working class American life.
And for so many of us, we've had to supplement, our paid labor for unpaid labor. And again, nobody has asked us.
So paid labor for unpaid labor. She didn't lose her job. she's still making $250,000 a year for standing up and saying I have a vagina, and at the same time excluding boys from activities that should be inclusive, not exclusive. So she's making money on being a sexist, effectively. Um, so again, she is talking as if this is her because she's trying to connect with working class suffering Americans. But like we can see here, she has an entire career being fraud. And make up your own mind.
I've been fighting for equality my whole life.
Fighting for equality. It's like how feminazis use this kind of language. They say equality, but what they do is 100% sexist, bigoted exclusion. It is not equality whatsoever.
My family came here as refugees. My mother has struggled with so many of the issues that so many women in our country, immigrant women in our country, are fighting for right now.
So with the psychology training that I do have, this is a very big tell. She just talked about her family being refugees. Family. Family is defined as a mother and a father and probably some kids. So she just said my family was refugees. You can even see that here. Her family were Indian refugees and living in Uganda. There were a lot of Indian merchant families living in Uganda in the Idi Amin era with 1970s, and they got expelled. It's an interesting story. There's a nice Hollywood documentary kind of movie about it. She was born in Illinois, and she was a silver spoon her entire life. But then you see her say family, and then she says, my mother has struggled with so many of the issues that so many women in
our country,
immigrant women in our country are fighting for right away. So even when she talks about her own family, she only talks about her own mother. This is incredibly telling because it shows the inclination, at least, I can wager a guess here, that maybe she had a bad relationship with her father. That could be a justifiable reason why she doesn't mention her parents struggled. Immigrant parents in our country are fighting for right now. That could be why she ended up becoming a feminazi. She had a bad father, could be that. And I completely